Hello, my name is Kathy Reevy from Threads Workshops. Welcome to this tutorial to make a Temari ball, which I've called Double Chrysanthemums. This is a level 3 advanced workshop, so I recommend that you make a few Temari balls before you attempt this one. I've got some more examples here, and as you can see, some of them are larger. You can work this design on any size ball, but so that you can see better, I've done the demonstration on an 80mm ball, and that just enables you to see where your needle goes a little bit easier. The ball is split into 8 sections and then subdivided again so that you're left with squares upon which to embroider your chrysanthemums. One chrysanthemum on each square is embroidered on top of another, and that's done obviously 6 times. You're only limited by the points of the first chrysanthemum really. So when you're stitching your first one, in terms of the number of rows, you shouldn't go further than the edge of the square. It should become clear as we go along. So the number of rows that you do may vary from the number of rows that I'm doing on the demonstration. We have, there's another ball here, which is a slightly different design, and I'm going to explain how that one works at the end of the tutorial. So enjoy the tutorial. Let's begin. For this design, we're going to start by dividing the ball into 8 sections. Now, I'm sure you all know how to do this, but just a reminder, you're going to need your tape and a pair of paper scissors and your pins. So first of all, wrap the tape around the ball, taking it to the base of the pin, not the end of the tape, as I'm sure you remember. So I'll check that around the ball a couple of times just to make sure I'm happy that that circumference is right. This is when you know that you've wrapped the ball around or not. So let's cut that off, and then to divide it up, of course, fold in half, make your notch, and then fold in half again, and obviously we're looking to make 7 notches in the tape, and you want your notches, I'm sure I've said this before, but you want your notches to go halfway across the tape. You don't want tiny ones, and you don't want a great big one so that it almost cuts the tape in half. So I'm trying to hold the ball in the picture and cut the tape at the same time, so you won't need to do that. So then divide it up again. Just 2 more. Okay, so I've got now a ball with a tape and 7 notches in it, and the end of the tape goes to the base of the pin. So I'm now going to put pins in, doesn't matter what colours at the moment, on every other notch. So you don't want them on those notches, you just want them on every other notch. So I've got 4 pins in now, and then I'm going to take a guess at where those ones go in the middle. So I'll put another 4 in. Sorry, another 2 in, I should have said. So all I've got now is a pin at the top, a pin at the bottom, and 4 around the outside. Obviously I've already measured this distance here, but I've guessed at this distance here. So you need to take your tape out and put it around the centre and check this distance here. And you can already see that this one is completely out. The second one should be fine because you've measured one of them. So that one's okay. And then that one isn't. I'm going to go around the other way and move that one. Because you've altered this distance, we're going to take it out again and check on the distance down this way here. Let's get that in correctly first. That one's out, that's okay. So I'm going to move that one up a little bit. Move that one down a bit. That's okay, that's okay, that's okay, and that's okay. You can also check that distance there. When you're happy, I'd move that one a bit, but when you're happy, I want you to then put another set of pins into the remaining notches. So that you should end up with 8 pins around the centre. Put it down, you can see, and a pin at the top and a pin at the bottom. Now you may have affected the distance here by putting those extra pins in, so you should take your tape out again and check these distances here, and then put your marker threads onto between the pins so that you've got 8 sections. When you've completed your spook knit, just lay it down and hold it up to the light and check that you're happy that your 8 pins are in evenly. Often the eye can pick up things that your tape doesn't. And then thread up whatever marker thread you're going to use. You can either use one of your cotton perlé threads, or you can use some metallic. I'm going to use the metallic, even though it's not as easy to stitch with. So if you remember, take a stitch anywhere in the ball and then another couple of stitches and sink that thread to get it to either the top or the bottom pin. Now you're aiming to go all the way round the pins and taking a tiny stitch at each one. Like that. Try not to get it caught up as I have here. That's it. So do this on every pin. You might need to use shorter lengths if you use the metallic, because it does tend to come unravelled. So I'm going to do that on each one so that it looks like that, and then I'm going to travel to the centre and put a line around the 8 pins in the centre. So I'll come back when that's completed. The ball's now divided into 8 sections with a marker thread around the circumference. So what we need to do now is to put 4 pins in around the circumference of a different colour, and we're going to put some more marker threads in when those 4 pins are in, and they are around the edge, around the circumference here. Now come up at any pin and take your thread all around the ball to the one immediately opposite. So in my case, the bluish one. And take a stitch, taking in a little bit of cotton, but not much. And then all the way back to the original red pin. And then go the other way. So over again to the blue pin, so always to the same pin. And then around back to the red pin. So you can see, I hope, what we've made is an oval shape from the red to the blue and back again, and the same on the other side from the blue to the red there. So we're going to now take out those 2 pins, so the blue and the red one, and then we're going to do the same thing from the yellow pin. From the yellow pin, you're going to be travelling to the white pin. So take your thread across to the white, but on the way we're going to catch in the previous threads. And if you can see this triangle here, and where these 2 threads cross, we want to just catch them. So I would do a tiny back stitch so that you take in all the threads like that. And then there's another triangle just there. Now the beauty of this is if your thread is slightly out, so it could be like that for example, then you can move it so that these 2 sections look the same size. So take a stitch. It doesn't matter whether you have your thread on the top or on the bottom for this. And then we're back at we've moved to the white pin. So take a stitch under and then continue round. That triangle looks okay. Just going to move that one a tiny bit. And then we're back to the yellow pin. We're going to do exactly the same in the other direction. So take a stitch, check your triangle size, back to the white pin, and then returning to the yellow pin, and then you can finish off. Try and make your centres quite neat for this, so you've got some neat crosses. So I'm going to come back then and show you what you end up with. So you should have ended up with 6 squares. If you look at the square there, and they go all the way around the ball, so there should be 6 altogether, and 8 triangles. So the triangles are the ones you were catching down, and those are like that. Now for this design we're going to be using the squares and embroidering inside each of those 6 squares to make the double chrysanthemums. So I want you to put a pin on the 4 marker threads that are the shortest. So if you're looking at this shape here, it's this one here, not on the diagonal ones. So put a pin in those 4 marker threads, and we're going to be stitching the first chrysanthemum around those pins. You can make them different colours if it helps, but it's not critical for this. Now I'm sure you'll remember that when you undo your skein of cotton perlé thread, you have a knot here and cut the thread at the knot, and then you've got your sewing lengths. I just want to mention the order of the threads for this. It doesn't really matter which colour you start with, but just make sure that you don't put the colour that is the same colour as your ball as your outside colour, because obviously it won't show. So in this one, probably the pink is quite dominant. So if you wanted the pink to be dominant, you would do that last. The first colour that you're going to use in this example is the lilac, and the second one is the blue. So the colour that's the same as your ball, you should try and make sure is in the middle. But as we've said before, you can do, although you're doing the same number of rows, you can do them in any sort of size block. So you could just do 2 rows of one row of another, and in this case I've put just 1 thread of lilac on the outside of this chrysanthemum. So we'll get started. Right-handers are going to start to the left of any diagonal marker thread. So for example this one here, and you're coming up as close to the centre as you can get. I'll show left-handers in a minute. And then take your thread behind that marker pin in the normal way, taking in the cotton under the marker thread and under the thread, working thread. So if I can just take that pin out and show you, your stitch is like that. But I'm going to put the pin back in because I think it anchors it a little bit as well. You need your pins for guidance. So take it around that pin and then take a stitch under that next diagonal marker thread. And again, it's really important that you take in some cotton, because otherwise it'll move up the marker thread and it won't look right. So then go to the next, turn it anti-clockwise and take a stitch behind the next pin. And then take a stitch as near to the centre as you can get underneath the marker thread. And it's really difficult to take that cotton in, but it's quite important that you do. Turn it round. Turn it anti-clockwise and then take a stitch near the centre. And we're almost making a sort of little star shape. Now, when you get here, you're going to go under all of the threads. So I've gone under this one here, under the marker thread, and I've got this one on top, so I'm going under everything. So I'm going to carry on round now, and I'm going to do about 3 rows, something like that. Let's do 3 to start with. So I'm now going to go under everything. So under this one, the marker thread, and my working thread. Put your thumb on the threads and it keeps them nice and flat and level and more neat. I just want to get to the third row. I think you can see more easily then. Again, don't forget to take your marker threads. So this is my last stitch on, or a couple of stitches on my second row. And now I'm at my third row. So can you see that I'm still going under these two here, these two threads here, under this one here, under the marker thread, under everything. And that's really important, as you won't get this little herringbone pattern that is starting to form at the centre there. So under everything. So your stitch underneath the marker thread is gradually getting bigger as you put more rows in. So like that. So this is my last couple of stitches. So I've now completed 3 rows and I'm going to just finish off. These pins are a nuisance sometimes, aren't they? I'm now going to just finish off in the normal way. If you've got thread left, you can move to another square, but I'm going to show you the next colour. You can obviously use the gold metallic as one row if you want in between, but I'm just going to use lilac, which is the same colour as the ball. If you're left-handed, you need to start to the right of any diagonal marker thread, so the ones that you haven't got the pins on, and very near the centre. And then turn the ball clockwise and take your first stitch behind that pin, taking in the cotton, and then turn it and take a stitch close to the centre on this other diagonal marker thread, and then turn it round and go under the next marker thread. Like that. So you're turning clockwise, keep your thumb on it when you can, and be careful to take up the marker thread at the centre. There you go. So the next one, the top of the pin, and clockwise. Sorry, this is taking me a little bit longer. And then and then your final one at the top there. Turn around, and we've got back to the beginning. So you've got back to where you started. It's not as neat as I would have liked. Right, so, and then the next row, obviously go round. Please watch the right-handed demonstration for the neatness aspect. And then the important thing is that you're going left to right and under everything. So under all those threads there, like that. So I've threaded up my second colour, and I'm going to come up here. So that point there, so just above those 3 rows and on the left of that marker thread. So carry on round, and I've taken my pins out now because they were just helping me to guide as a guideline and an anchor point, but it's much easier to keep the threads flat and to put your thumb on it when you haven't got the pins in the way. So now this one we're going under the lot, so under all of the yellow threads, can you see? And this thread's going on top, and you're going under that as well. So round, under all of those yellow threads, under the lilac one, and round. And I think I'm going to do 4 rows of lilac just for a change, just to show you that you can vary it. So my second row's, my needle's going to come up here just above this lilac thread, and around. I don't know if you can start to see that there's a herringbone pattern forming here. If you don't have that, you need to, I'm afraid, take it out and try again, because that's sort of critical to the design. And you'll only get it if you go under all of the threads. So that's my first row of lilac. So you can see that I've done my lilac thread, and I've also put in a row of gold metallic. Now I'm starting my third colour, and I'm going to come up here, so just above the gold. If you're right-handed, left-handers will come up here. So take your thread around and take a stitch as usual and go round, and you're going under absolutely everything. So it's quite a large stitch now. Now, particularly as the shape gets bigger, you need to make sure that your stitch at the point, can you see that that's pulled across quite a bit, that gold there? So you need to make sure that your stitch at the point stays in place, and to do that you take the stitch a little bit further away from the point that you would think, so that it stays flat or flatter. So I'm going to just, instead of stitching here, I'm going to just go a bit further away, and then it'll stay flat. Now with this design, we're going to be working up to this line here. So you can see how much more you've got to fit in. So I'm going to do probably 3 rows of blue, and then I'll see how I go. I might go back to my yellow for a row or 2, but you can stitch. This is obviously your template for the other squares, so remember what you've done. So again, I'm going a little bit further than you would think you would need to. So that means you haven't always got as much space as you think. So I'm going now under, so I'm putting my needle here and coming up here under absolutely everything, and you can start to really see now the herringbone pattern emerge just here. So carry on with that. So my dark blue is finished. I'm going to go back to the yellow and put a couple of rows of that in. So I've started here just below the blue, just there. So left-handers will be here. So let's just see how that works out. So I can only work to the line, to this line here. So I need to just be careful that I don't go over it, to adjust if you need to. Okay, so I'm going to do one more row, and this is important. This needle goes all the way across from here to here, so it's quite a big stitch, but you can really see this herringbone pattern now. So make sure you finish with a colour that you actually would be happy that the ball finishes on. So this is my final one. So I'm going to finish that one off now. Now please remember what you did. So how many rows of each, because you won't necessarily be able to see all of this, this shape when you do the next bit of the chrysanthemum, so make a note of that. So that's the first bit of the chrysanthemum. You've done 4 petals, if you like, and we're going to work another one on top, and you're going to hate me for a bit because you're going to cover up some of this beautiful stitching that you've just done. So if I can show you this one, the bottom chrysanthemum, all that's showing of it is these bits here, but also the center bit here is showing, so that's why that's so important. So let's have a look at this second chrysanthemum then. We need some pins in to start with, and I'm going to suggest that you put your pins just a tiny bit above the apex there, on the diagonal lines this time. So put them on the diagonal lines. And then thread up some, in my case, yellow, which is what I started with. And I'm going to do the same design on the other marker threads. So to do that, I'm going to come up to the left. It takes a while to actually find the right place. As close as I can to the centre of the marker thread. So I'm coming up to the left of this one here where there's a petal. If you're left-handed, you will come up to the right of it and stitch the other way. So I'm now going to go over that stitching and stitch just behind my pin. And then take a stitch into the cotton. This is why it's much easier with a bigger ball, because you've got a bit more space. Like that. So this is exactly the same as you did on the first chrysanthemum. It just seems a bit more complicated because you're covering up that first one, and there's just not as much room to get your needle under that marker thread. Try and take the cotton with it. So these pins want to be just where the apex is, really. And that's my first round. And now you're doing exactly the same, going under everything when you get to the second row. And I think I did 3 rows of the yellow, and that's why you need to remember. So now I'm going under that lot there. So under this one, my working threads on top. So you're going under everything. You only need the pins for the first few rows, and then you can take them out because they just get in the way. So I'll come back when I've got my second colour ready. So with my second colour now, I'm coming up just here. It's exactly the same as you did with the first bit of the chrysanthemum. If you're left-handed, you will come up here, and you're just basically going around the ball in the same way. And it's just harder to get your needle in, but it's important that you go under all of those threads like that. And you can see that you're making a herringbone pattern exactly the same as you did here. So these bits are always going to show. That's the first bit of your chrysanthemum. And one of the things I should also say is try and be careful not to pierce. When you come up with your needle, it's quite easy to pierce this bit here, and it really pulls it out of shape and you get in a mess before you know it. So it's worth making an effort with that stitch. Really easy to pierce the next bit. So you can see it developing, and you can see why it's important to have quite a neat centre as well. That's it. So I'm going to do 4 rows of this lilac, which is what I did on the previous round, and then a row of gold, and finally some blue and yellow. So I've now done my lilac and a row of gold, and I've threaded up some dark blue. So I've come up just above the gold, just here. If you're left-handed, you will come up just here. and I'm going to just go all the way to the end. Be careful now with your points, and round, and take my needle all the way through to the top of that gold there. Now you'll notice that you've got further to go on this one here because it's a longer length, being a diagonal. So you're going to be stopping your pattern short of this cross here. Whereas with the one below, you've worked to the line here. So it gets a bit tricky to get your needle in, but try not to pierce the thread across these here. And you can really see now these 8 herringbone patterns come into play, and that's really what makes the chrysanthemum, I think. So I'm going to continue with my 3 rows of blue and 2 rows of yellow. So this is the completed double chrysanthemum, and I think you can see the herringbone stitch here, and that you've got that 8 times forward done first with the one underneath, and then the forward done with the chrysanthemum bit on top, and that with the bottom chrysanthemum you're stitching all the way to the line, and then with the one on the diagonals you're only stitching to here. So now I want you to replicate that on the other squares of the ball, and you will see that these 2 edges meet and these 2 won't meet. So I hope that's I hope you have fun with that. Now I want to go through how you can vary this design a bit. These 2 balls are actually slightly different, although they're both double chrysanthemums. This one is the one that we stitched in the tutorial. So we started off with our pins on the horizontal and vertical lines, not on the diagonals, and the petals here meet and the petals on the diagonal ones don't. So I've done a little bit of stitching around the meeting of the threads here to decorate it. I've also put a bit of lilac thread against the marker thread here just to finish it off. And you can do what you like here. You can put some cat's whisker type threads, stitches in if you want. So that's the one we've actually been doing. This one is slightly different in that instead of putting the pins on the horizontal and vertical marker threads, I started with the diagonals. So in this case the diagonal ones meet, and to make them meet I had to do some more rows. So there's a load of gold rows here. The vertical and horizontal ones meet anyway, but the diagonal ones wouldn't have done had I not done a few more rows. So you just have to stitch up to the end of the diagonal threads. If I show you on this square here, it would mean that I would have started with my pins on the diagonals instead of on the longer ones like that. So to start with I would bring, I'm just guessing the distances, but I would bring my needle up to the left of this one here and stitch all the way around first. But I would continue my stitching right to the cross here. And then the next ball, but I'd do more rows. The next chrysanthemum would you'd stitch all the way to here. But here You can see that where the diagonal petals meet, I've just sneaked in here a couple of rows in white just to finish it off. You can decorate it really in any way that you wish. So I'll look forward to seeing your finished balls. So we've reached the end of the tutorial. I do hope that you've enjoyed it and you'll be pleased with your chrysanthemum ball. If you have any questions at all, please do email me on kathy@threadsworkshops.co.uk or give me a ring on 01335 310 125. So enjoy making more of this design, and I'll look forward to seeing you on a future tutorial or indeed a workshop in Alstonfield. Thank you very much.